On an ordinary Saturday in July 1953, an 18-year-old boy walked into a modest studio in Memphis, paid only $4, and recorded 2 songs. The recording was simple, but the voice that came out of it, a raw and passionate voice, would forever change the course of music. The question that still lingers today, were those tracks recorded as a gift to his mother? And have you ever truly heard that first rough sound of Elvis, before the success, before the fame? Who is this boy? What did he do? And why does it matter today? Because today you'll discover that this gesture carried a grand meaning and still echoes to this day. It was a hot morning in Mississippi when little Elvis Aaron Presley began to discover the sound that would change his life. Born on January 8, 1935 in Tupelo, he came into the world in a 2-room house built by his own father, Vernon Presley. The family lived in modest conditions, surrounded by a routine of hard work and faith. His mother, Gladys Love Presley, was the soul of that home. She worked all day but still found time to sing gospel songs with her son in the small local church. From an early age, Elvis understood that music was a refuge, a place where problems felt smaller and love became visible. Elvis's childhood was marked by poverty, but also by an incredibly strong emotional bond with Gladys. He was a shy, sensitive boy deeply attached to his mother. She was his best friend, his safe harbor, and, in many ways, his reason to exist. When Elvis cried, it was Gladys who comforted him. When he dreamed too high, it was she who told him he could. That relationship shaped the character of the future artist and would become the heart of many of his songs. Songs about longing, simple love, and faith.
And you, as a fan of the king, what do you think? Was this deep connection between Elvis and his mother what truly shaped his artistic soul? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know what this period of his life represents to you. During the 1940s, music was the main form of entertainment for Southern families. On the radio, Elvis listened to everything: hymns, blues, country, and gospel. He attended church with Gladys and was fascinated by the black choirs that sang with a passion and energy that seemed to come from another world. That feeling stayed with him. Even without knowing how to read sheet music, the boy memorized melodies with impressive ease. When he turned 11, he asked for an air rifle as a gift, but his mother convinced him to take a guitar instead. That simple, domestic moment would become the first concrete step toward his destiny. Elvis grew up surrounded by contrasts. He saw his father go to jail for writing a bad check, felt the sting of inequality and social prejudice, yet kept a pure heart. His mother's faith and his almost childlike optimism made him believe that something better would come. When the family moved to Memphis in 1948, he was just 13, with an old guitar as his companion. Memphis was vibrant, full of sounds and colors. The neighborhood they lived in, Lauderdale Courts, was home to working-class families and immigrants, and the streets pulsed with the sound of rhythm and blues. It was there that Elvis began absorbing the city's musical culture, blending white and black influences that would later define his unique style. In his teenage years, he was a reserved boy, with his hair combed in an unusual style and clothes that seemed bold for the time. Many thought he was eccentric. Others saw him as an outsider. But Gladys always defended him. She would say her son had something special, something the world didn't yet understand, and she was right. Elvis spent hours alone, playing the guitar softly and trying to find the sound he heard inside his head. He worked as a truck driver, took odd jobs, and helped with the family expenses, but music was his true passion. Gladys was everything to him. Not just a mother, but a spiritual presence, almost sacred. She taught him simple values: gratitude, compassion, and faith. She always said that even when things seem hard, God opens a way, and Elvis believed it. That unconditional love would become the emotional foundation that sustained him when success came, and also the weight he carried when distance and fame separated them. By 1953, Elvis was no longer the shy boy from Tupelo. He was a hard-working young man, full of dreams and insecurities. He heard about a small studio in Memphis where anyone could record a song for a small fee. It was the Memphis Recording Service, owned by Sam Phillips, a man who believed that if he could find a white singer with a black soul, he could change American music. Elvis didn't know that yet, but that studio would become the stage for his first great turning point.
Money was tight, but he decided to take a chance. He told his mother he wanted to hear how his voice sounded on a record, maybe even give it to her as a gift. For a simple and loving woman like Gladys, such a gesture would have been priceless. She was the reason behind his courage. It wasn't about fame or money, it was about the desire to give something beautiful to the woman who had given him everything. Behind the mythical figure the world would one day know as the King of Rock, there was a son who just wanted to make his mother proud. This period in Elvis's life shows how deeply his roots shaped both the artist and the man. Poverty taught him to dream, Gladys's love gave him purpose, and the faith she instilled helped him believe in himself. When he walked into the studio for the first time in July 1953, he carried with him all that emotional weight. It wasn't just a recording, it was a silent tribute to the woman who loved him above all else. And it was there, before any success, before any stage, that the myth began to take shape, in the heart of a son, in honor of his mother. It was July 18, 1953, an ordinary Saturday in Memphis, but a day that would forever change the history of music. Elvis Aaron Presley, a young man of just 18, walked with steady steps toward the Memphis Recording Service, the studio founded by Sam Phillips, which would later become the legendary Sun Records. Elvis wore simple clothes, carried a shy look, and held a huge dream: to record his voice on a record. He had saved $4, all he could afford from his truck driving job, and decided to spend it all in that little studio. He said he just wanted to hear how his voice sounded on vinyl, maybe to give it to his mother, Gladys, who had always believed in him. No one there could have imagined that this recording would mark the beginning of a cultural revolution. When he entered the studio, he was greeted by Marion Keisker, Sam Phillips's assistant, and the first person to recognize the special spark in that young man. She asked what kind of music he sang, and Elvis answered simply, "I sing all kinds." That almost naive phrase summed up what he would become: an artist without labels, effortlessly blending blues, gospel, and country. Marion told him to stand in front of the microphone and set up the equipment. The air was hot and still. Elvis held the guitar with trembling hands, but the moment he began to sing, something changed. His voice filled the studio with a sad sweetness, full of emotion and truth. The first song he recorded was My Happiness, a soft and melancholic ballad originally popularized by the Ink Spots. The lyrics spoke of longing and distant love, themes that deeply resonated with a simple, dreamy young man. Right after, he recorded That's When Your Heartaches Began, another romantic tune that, in many ways, mirrored his soul. There was no band, no orchestra, just Elvis and his guitar. It was raw, intimate, and authentic. When he finished, the studio fell silent for a few seconds. Marion Keisker wrote in her notebook, "Good ballad singer, hold." Those few words would become one of the most important notes in music history. The record made that day was an acetate, a type of experimental disc used for personal or demo recordings. Elvis paid to have a copy, which was supposedly to be given to Gladys. This version, repeated for decades, became almost a legend among fans. Many believed the young man truly wanted to give his mother his voice as a gesture of love and gratitude. Other scholars argue that while that feeling was real, Elvis also had in mind the chance of being discovered by someone in the music industry. The truth probably lies somewhere between the two versions. He wanted to please his mother, but also dreamed of something bigger. Deep down, love and ambition walked side by side. And what do you think? Was Elvis's first recording truly a sincere gift for his mother? Or was it already the first calculated step of a bigger dream? Share your opinion in the comments. Let's discuss this story that still divides fans today. The acetate, however, never reached Gladys's hands. The disc remained for years with a friend of Elvis named Ed Leek.
Some say Elvis forgot about it, others that he loaned it out. Either way, that small, hastily made record, created with limited resources, would become a historical relic. Decades later, in 2015, the original acetate was auctioned for an enormous sum, proof that even an amateur recording, when filled with truth, can cross generations. The importance of that moment lies not only in the songs themselves, but in what they represented. My Happiness and That's When Your Heartaches Begin weren't modern or daring songs. They were sentimental classics with simple lyrics and gentle arrangements. But in Elvis's voice, they were reborn. He wasn't imitating anyone. His performance was emotional, almost confessional. There was a raw honesty in it that few recordings of that era could convey. He wasn't just singing, he was revealing himself. His voice trembled, his breathing was audible, and all of it gave the record a rare humanity. It's curious to think that at that moment, Sam Phillips wasn't even present. It was Marion who led the session and remembered the boy's name. Later, she would tell Sam about the young man with the golden voice, insisting that there was something special about him. That observation was what made Elvis get called back to the studio months later, opening the door for his second acetate and eventually his contract with Sun Records. Without that shy, seemingly insignificant recording in 1953, perhaps the history of rock would never have happened. What makes this story so fascinating is the contrast between the simplicity of the act and the magnitude of its impact. A young, unknown man in a small studio singing two old ballads, driven by love for his mother and curiosity to hear his own voice. It was impossible to imagine that this raw sound, captured on a cheap record, would be the first step of the artist who would conquer the world a few years later. The 1953 acetate is more than a recording. It's the portrait of a moment of purity, before fame, before the spotlight, when Elvis was still just a devoted son, a dreamer in search of a sound. And that day, without realizing it, he found much more than his own voice. He found the beginning of a legend. The year 1954 marked the turning point in Elvis Presley's life. After that first recording in 1953, the one where he paid $4 to hear his own voice, something inside him changed. That simple experience lit a spark that would never go out. Elvis began to believe there might actually be a path between the dreams he carried and the real world. He had no formal musical education, couldn't read music, but had something that couldn't be taught, a voice full of soul, emotion, and identity. It was that mix of innocence and determination to prove himself that led him back to the studio in early 1954. On January 4, Elvis returned to the Memphis recording service, the same studio where he had made his first acetate. This time, he recorded two more songs, I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. These songs showed vocal and emotional maturity. He sang with more confidence, but still carried the sweetness and shyness of a young man who sang more with his heart than with technique. The lyrics spoke of love and loyalty and seemed to reflect his own relationship with music and his mother. That second recording reinforced in Marion Keisker and Sam Phillips the feeling that this young man had something special. He wasn't just another singer hoping for a break. There was something in the way he sang, an intensity that couldn't be taught. In the following months, Elvis continued his simple life. He worked as a truck driver, helped his parents, and spent nights playing guitar and singing for friends. But inside him grew an unease. He wanted more. He wanted to perform on a stage, be heard, feel the response of the audience. Around that time, he met guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, two local musicians who would later form the trio that created the foundation of rock and roll. Sam Phillips, intrigued by what Marion had told him, decided to give the young man a chance. He scheduled a session for July 1954, with no high expectations, just to see what the boy could do. On July 5, Elvis returned to Sun Studio. He recorded a few ballads, but nothing seemed special. The atmosphere was tense. Sam nearly ended the session, thinking nothing good would come from it. But suddenly, something happened.
During a break, Elvis began to play around on his guitar and started singing "That's All Right, Mama," an old song by Arthur Crudup, a blues classic. But he didn't sing it the traditional way. He added rhythm, energy, and swing. Scotty and Bill joined in, and the studio transformed. Sam Phillips rushed to turn on the microphones and capture the new sound. It was light, daring, something no one had ever heard before. In that spontaneous moment, rockabilly was born, the fusion of blues, country, and youthful energy that would define a generation. When Sam heard the full playback, he knew he had something special. A few days later, the song was played for the first time on Memphis's WHBQ radio station. The phone lines lit up. People wanted to know who this singer was, a white man with the soul of a black performer. The mix of sounds was unprecedented, and the public's reaction was immediate. Within days, the name Elvis Presley spread through the city. He went from an unknown kid to a local sensation, and Sun Records realized something revolutionary had begun. The connection between these two moments, the boy recording a gift for his mother and the young man accidentally creating a new musical genre, is what makes this story so powerful. Elvis never lost the essence of that simple boy from Tupelo. Even when surrounded by fame and lights, he carried with him the memory of his mother and the value of his roots. His love for Gladys continued to fuel every step he took. When he sang, even in his most upbeat songs, there was always a hint of melancholy, a touch of nostalgia that came from home. And maybe that's why audiences loved him so much. Because behind the image of an idol, there was someone human, vulnerable, and real. Between 1954 and 1955, Elvis began performing at fairs, radio programs, and small shows across the American South. Each performance increased the excitement around his name. He was still a shy young man, but on stage, he transformed. His spontaneous moves, the hip shakes that scandalized the conservatives and thrilled the young women, were all natural. There was no calculation, only feeling. The audience saw sincerity, and that was enough. His fame grew quickly, and his contract with RCA would soon take him to a global level. But it's important to remember that it all began humbly, with an acetate made out of love. The journey between 1953 and 1954 represents not only the birth of a myth, but also the proof that great moments in history often come from the simplest gestures. A boy paid $4 just to hear his own voice. That same boy, months later, would create the sound that transformed American popular music. The link between those two scenes is the heart. Elvis never planned to be the king of rock. He simply followed his instinct, his love, and his need to express what he felt. And maybe that's why his voice still lives on today. Because before he was a symbol, Elvis was a son, a dreamer, and an artist guided by emotion. That acetate from 1953 was the beginning. The one from 1954, the awakening. And the sound that came from them was the birth of a legend. And so ends one of the most moving stories in music. The humble beginning of a boy who, driven by love for his mother and the strength of his dreams, forever changed the sound of the world. Every note recorded in that old studio still echoes as a reminder that great legends are born from courage and faith. If this story touched your heart, if you also feel this connection with the king, then don't let this video end here. Subscribe to the channel right now, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any new episodes, and help this community of fans grow. Leave your like because it shows you want more stories about Elvis Presley's life, his beginnings, and the secrets behind the music. Comment below what moved you the most about this chapter. His first recording, his love for Gladys, or that moment when the dream began to become real. And of course, share this video with other Elvis admirers. Show the world that the King's voice and soul are still alive within each of us. Thank you for watching until the end. And remember, Elvis's legacy never dies. It only changes its tune and keeps playing in the hearts of those who love him. See you in the next video.